Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey everybody, welcome to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. My email address, jason@sportsspectrum.com. I'd love to hear from you. Any guest ideas you have, any thoughts on today's interview with Dave Aranda from Baylor. Love to hear from you, jason@sportsspectrum.com. And we are presented today by the International Justice Mission, believing every person deserves to be safe and free from violence. Chance for you to join the fight to end slavery in our lifetime by visiting their website, ijm.org/TF, to become a Freedom Partner today. Baylor head football coach Dave Aranda is our guest here today on the show. He was just named to Baylor's head football coaching job in January of 2020, January 16th to be exact. Prior to that, he was with LSU. He was their defensive coordinator and assistant head coach from 2016 to 2019. And that 2019 season last year was quite the special season for the LSU Tigers, and Dave Aranda was a big part of that. And they went on to win the 2020 College Football National Championship game and finish off an undefeated season, a pretty amazing year for LSU. And now Dave becomes a head coach on the highest level, taking over the reins at Baylor. And today we're going to spend time talking to him about that new role as head coach at Baylor, and also learn a little bit about his faith journey and why Jesus is so important to Dave and his entire family. Take a listen to Dave Aranda, Baylor head football coach, joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. Coach Aranda, welcome to Sports Spectrum.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is fun. I'm looking forward to this.
Me too. Is it weird still to hear Baylor head football coach? It's been a few months, but still, that's we've been in a pandemic, so you may not have heard it as much as you probably would have heard otherwise. Is that still a little strange for you to hear that?
No, I think it's some of these days have been long days, and a lot of Zoom calls and a lot of communication, which I love. And so I think we've worked out the newness.
Tell me what this has been like for you as a head coach where, you get the job in January 16th. It's kind of a whirlwind after you're coming off a national championship, and we'll talk all about that in a little bit with LSU. And then you go 2 months hard, I'm sure, and then all of a sudden everything has to be put on pause. What was that like for you? Maybe the first couple months adjusting to the role, and then having to press pause in the pandemic and continuing your job, which doesn't stop, but it just has to kind of become a little different for you.
Right. Yeah. The early part was putting that staff together, meeting with the team, trying to get the heartbeat of the team where they were. I remember the day that I was hired, and that morning kind of waking up to a call saying, do you want the job? And yes. And then later that day, kind of the team from Baylor flying in to meet, and then saying, "Hey, Dave, we're taking you back to Waco." And so I think I packed maybe three suits or something, and on a plane. And that night, meeting with the team, I could see their, they were hurt. They were hurt. You could see that the effect that they had, or the affection they had for Coach Rule, and the respect and love that was there. And there was some somberness to it. And I remember just standing in front of them, just feeling that. And it gave me strength, because I knew how this team can connect to somebody, and how, that was stuff I saw on the tape, on watching them play. You could see that connection, and you could see that love. And then here's the other side of it right here, looking at these guys, looking at me. And so there's a lot of work that right away the next day had to be done there to, work to build the trust, and to try to show like who you are and that you're real. And I want to get to know you, and I know you've been hurt, and kind of let me in. And so that is still ongoing. The staff hiring was a big piece, and, trying to really hire for character and for attitude, and the belief for me is that we teach who we are. I think players, same thing. They play who they are. I think in critical moments, stuff comes out that's no surprise to their mom or dad or brother or sister. They've known that all the while. It happens to be in the fourth quarter, in a 2-minute drill at the end of a big game, but it's been the people that love them. It's known. I think coaches, same thing. I think what's in your heart is kind of what comes out. And I think trying to hire guys with great heart and compassionate and, fellows that are able to be empathetic, are able to show vulnerability and be real, I think. And we're in it for the right reasons, developing, men and developing leaders. And so I think, one way to go with the recruits or the hiring piece would be, hey, there's this scheme. Hey, there's this success last year. Hey, there's this trend. And that can be, I don't know, the thought would be to hire for what's inside and train for the outside stuff, with the thought that you hire the person with the right connections inside, that you can get whatever you want to get on the outside in terms of systems and philosophies and stuff. And so, that's ongoing still, but I feel really good about the people that we've got and how we're gelling in that. And then, in the midst of all of that, then the break, it was during our spring break. And so it was, we were set to come back and start spring ball. And so during our spring break, I was my first time back in Baton Rouge, being in Waco for those 2 months. And, this is the NBA just got canceled. Various things are shut down. And it was that, hey, this is going to be real. This is going to affect us. And so I'm at my girls' soccer game, and I'm texting back and forth with our associate AD and our AD saying, okay, let's move spring ball back. Let's do this. And we come back that following Monday, staff-wise, and there was concern. You could see with some of there's some West Coast guys that we had. And the regional, I think, read of all this, I think, is unique.
Yeah.
I think the cable TV and everything has something to do with that. But I think just like the perspective, I could sense the folks that were coming from West Coast were just very concerned. You could read it on their face coming back from spring break. And for me, it was the first time really kind of having something that's outside of the norm. And, we're in this meeting. Are we supposed to be having this meeting? And, I think it was something like less than 60 people at that time was something that was being said. And so we had that meeting because we knew that we were going to be separated for a while, not knowing how long. And so we tried to, here's kind of how we're going to think mobile recruiting. Here's how we're going to think mobile football installing. Yeah. Here's how we're going to think mobile staff meetings. And that's basically, what came out of that one day is what we've been doing since then. But the connections, the ability to meet with people and really sit down and talk with them, and we talked about the West Wing walk and talk, and not having the hey, I'm talking to you, but I really got to get to this, and I'm halfway here and I'm halfway there. Just the really kind of the settle and open up. That's been great. And I think it's reflected right now. We're recruiting at a high level, I feel. And a lot of that is, anytime I think people have to sit down and really see what's real, I think it's advantage Baylor. And so, with our people,
mm-hmm.
And so there's positives to it, but, anytime we can get back, doing what we're supposed to be doing, that's good too. So we'll see.
Absolutely. Dave Aranda is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. We're the intersection of sports and faith. So let's intersect the conversation a little bit with faith. I know that's very important to you. What has the Lord shown you and maybe taught you during this quarantine? What are some of the rhythms, or maybe even just a lesson or two that God has kind of revealed and shown you during these couple months that we've been quarantined here?
be a servant for others. I think I feel that's always been a calling for me, and I've always had it in my heart, but now more than ever, I think, the opportunity to call our team, just being new and knowing guys prior to the break, but not really,
Right.
and having maybe one or two conversations with some. There are some others with a lot more than that, but maybe there's a few guys on our team, maybe one or two talks. And so calling the phone, trying to get their parents on the phone. We did a Zoom call with all the parents a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and then checking up on guys. How are they doing? How are they feeling? Has the virus affected their family? Is there, I'm here for them. It's been some of my positive days have been when the players have called me with problems. That just shows me that they're starting to trust now, and they care, and they know that I'm there for them. And I feel great responsibility on acting on behalf of them when that happens. But I think the ability to reach out, and all of our staff, our support staff, there's people that we hired and maybe had a day on the job prior to going on quarantine. And so getting to know their families, and it goes on and on. And so I think, to extend yourself so that people know that they're not alone, and that there's people looking out for them, and people caring for them, I think has been a big piece of what I've been doing.
We'll get back to our conversation with Dave Aranda from Baylor in just a second, but I want to tell you a little bit more about IJM. And while we sit here and learn about the reality of slavery, there are thousands of traffickers using all of their power to keep people enslaved forever, all because slavery is profitable. They simply value money more than they value human life. These slave owners are relentless, calculated, and tenacious, unafraid to use their power, money, and influence to oppress others. That's why we must act. Each one of us here needs to partner with the International Justice Mission, IJM, by becoming Freedom Partners today. These Freedom Partners give $24 or more each month to IJM and are given regular opportunities to pray and advocate with IJM for the end of slavery. The single largest barrier to IJM freeing millions of slaves is a lack of financial resources. Without the monthly giving of Freedom Partners like you and I, slavery will not end. It's simple. IJM knows where the slaves are and has a plan to rescue them. And because of Freedom Partners, IJM is setting slaves free and putting their owners behind bars. You can check out their website, ijm.org/TF, ijm.org/TF, and become a Freedom Partner and join IJM in the fight against violence and oppression. Now back to our conversation with Dave Aranda from Baylor, joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. Tell us about that faith and where it kind of came from, where your journey to the Lord kind of started and took shape. We all have a testimony, if you will, a time when we said yes and made that faith our own in Jesus. When did that happen for you?
I grew up in a religious home, so we're Roman Catholic. My mom, very much so. And I remember my dad would go to church some, but some, my mom, pretty devout. And so I was altar boy, and we went to Sacred Heart Church, Redlands, California. So I went to school there, and we went to church there. And, I think those younger years, I thought, I don't remember any quarrel there. I remember really good times, and I remember good friends. When I got to high school, I guess this is probably a common thing, but my grades went down. I was a football player. There was never really like a strong issue with drugs or anything like that. I would have the occasional and everything, but nothing, beer or anything, nothing strong. Yeah. But my faith started to wane. And I remember looking at my mom and going, she just believes just like that. She doesn't struggle with anything? Why does she ask this or ask that? I'm starting to have now questions in my head, And at that point, I really didn't talk to anyone about it. I imagine I could have talked to her, and I regret that I never did, So high school wise, there was never a point of like, I'm on the street or anything like that. It was always a real nurturing and safe spot. But I think just like in terms of like identity and who you are, and, hey, I'm wearing this face today. I'm going to try on this other face next week. Just who am I and all that was pretty strong. I think I tried to join the Navy and got denied. My shoulder, I think I had 5 operations in high school, and so I didn't pass. Then not knowing, so it was one of those things where you sign up, and for a year you're going to like the local recruiting office is right by the Pizza Hut in town, and I was kind of set to go, and when you don't go, now it's like, well, I've been at school. I haven't really been going to school for a year. So what am I doing now?
Yeah.
And high school coaches took me in. I started coaching, and I ended up at Cal Lutheran University in Thousand Oaks, California. And, I found philosophy there, and I really tried to understand and have a relationship with God, faith and reason, kind of diving right in. I'd been there to a degree, not as sophisticated, but I'd been there since high school. Now we're having better lexicon now. And so like I ended up being a philosophy major. Never would have thought that would have ever happened. And so I started trending more probably away from God at that point, even more. And now I'm having a way to kind of talk about it and like put it in a sentence now. I go to Texas Tech as a grad assistant. It was Mike Leach's staff, bunch of, Sonny Dykes, Art Briles, Dana Holgerson, great coaches.
Yeah.
One of the coaches on that staff was Brian Norwood. And Brian and I were just on the staff for 1 year, and Brian was a Christian, and all these great coaches and everything. Ron Harris is still a great mentor to me. He went to Cal Lutheran, and he was the reason for me going up there, really. Great family. Brian stood out. Brian was a Christian. I could do the way he interacted with people, the way he treated people. It was almost, you would see guys, and the staff there in the day to day, and there would be times to where if this was like a cartoon, they're in the storm. You know what I mean? They're you could see it. It's beautiful outside, sunny day, but inside it was like the George Clooney movie where the ship gets taken over. I forget, then Boston or something. I forget it's like that type of storm. Perfect storm. Yeah. You can sense that's going inside of them. And they would all have days like that. I would never really see it with Brian Norwood. I never really would. There was almost like, I don't know, I'd use the word grace really. And, that was my first experience with a coach, seeing the type of impact that a coach could have with Christianity. And that's just strong when you see that. And we have a coach now on our staff, Brian Stewart, who is very similar. Brian, in the later years, was a mentor to me, and Brian's the same way. And he mentioned working camps with Tony Dungy and Herm Edwards and seeing the same type of thing. And it's pretty cool that he said that, because it's real. It's something you sense, just the day-to-day inner turmoil, inner storms, and the ability to kind of navigate that. So I struggled with it through college, through grad school, and I tried to get into some divinity schools coming out of Texas Tech. So I was going to be a professor, was the plan, or I was going to go into coaching. Yeah. I ended up choosing coaching, and I think getting married, first kids born, Houston, was where I was coaching. Religion just wasn't really a piece. I pretty much detached completely now. It didn't come until I was coaching in Hawaii, where I picked up the Bible. I would read the Bible. I spent a lot of time. What do you call it? Talking with talking with various coaches that would be Christian coaches. Or I ended up really giving my life to Christ. And really, since that point, I think the ability to kind of let go of control and open up my heart. I think, I've been able to do that. I think with people, I just for a long time struggled to do it with God. And whether it was the framing of father, or it was just, admitting that you're not in control and that you can't, for as smart as maybe you think you are, you're not going to be able to figure this out. And just the ability to be okay in that space, to know that there's a greater purpose, and that you're going to be okay. That took a while.
So you have to transfer that into all of your life. You're a husband, you're a dad, you got, I believe, 3 kids, right? 2 daughters and a son. And, now you're a head coach, so you have a lot of responsibilities. So how does that faith now, today, here in 2020, kind of shape you, both as a coach, but also as a man, as a husband, and as a dad? How does that, because it's one thing to accept Christ and sort of give your life to him, but then it kind of becomes part of you in shaping you a lot, how you were describing the coaches that you worked with. So how has that been for you, and maybe where you are today in terms of how your faith shapes you for who you are?
Yeah, everything. Yeah, I think a true connection, say like an energy between people, to create an environment where connection can happen and a love and respect can happen. So connection would be, I think we've all been in talks. We all have family where you feel that you can be yourself. You feel that I don't have to put on these faces. I don't have to try to be somebody that I'm not. I can give my opinion. I can say what's on my mind. I can be real, and that there's people there that love me and are there for me and want to help me and see in me the most positive thing. See your God-given talent and are invested in bringing out that talent and invested in you being the best version of yourself. I think that's everything. And I think, to see sports through that lens puts it in a whole different perspective. And so now you're working to use sport to way to develop men and develop leaders, as opposed to the scoreboard and everything else. And so I feel that's completely it.
What was that experience like last year? That's a dream season, right? To be a part of with any team. When you go 15-0 and you win a national championship, and you're a big part of that as a coach. But what did that show you about success? We hear about success a lot in the world that we walk in, which is sports and faith. And what is true success, right? Success on the field is saying, wow, you just went 15-0, coach. That's about as perfect as you can get. And you won a national championship. But what have you learned about that? Because success can refine you or define you for a lot of people from this world and what's happening in it versus your faith. So what did you learn last year, both maybe as a Christian, but also as a coach, that's helped you kind of get ready for, future coaching opportunities, both with Baylor here in 2020, but going on in the next year in Baylor in 2021 and Baylor in 2022? Like, what's the lesson that you take from having the success that you had last year with LSU?
That's a tough question right there. That's a hard one. I think, there was a time when I was at Cal Lutheran, and our head coach was named Scott Squires. And he had played for Frosty Westring at Pacific Lutheran University. And Frosty at the time, I still have all of his books and everything. He was author, speaker.
Yeah.
Just a great soul, really. There's a lot to be learned from Frosty. And we at Cal Lutheran, we were basically an offshoot of that and did a lot of those same things. And one of Frosty's talks was, hey, the models of winning. There is the red car and the blue car. The red car is on the road to success. It's a comparison model. It's me versus you and all of it. And then the blue car is on the success road. It's more of process. It's more of being the best version of you, right? Being better tomorrow than you are today, right? And the improvements in that. And there was a lot of with LSU, and it was as positive as it was, and as good at people as it was. There was a lot of just push, and you win, and you can win at a real high level doing that way. And I think a lot of people do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the ability to have to be in program to where the focus is on the process and the focus is on getting people to maximize themselves and be the best version of themselves and not extend into a comparison of us versus that, and not thinking that the competition is something that we have to go out and win. We just have to be able to improve ourselves, I think in the process of doing that, like how we're treating people, how we're handling the ups and downs, one without the other, in terms of how you get winning and how you treat people. I think they're pretty tied together. And so I think, a lot of the last season gives me a lot of the ability to kind of see the good and the bad just with college football. I think there is a, it's difficult to work through because of all the pressures, the TV screens and the cameras and just the lights and all of it. It's to be real strong about what you believe and to hold true to it. Easier said than done.
Sure. As we wind down here, last question, Coach. I'm always curious to know, if you have a scripture or a book in the Bible or something that you've been reading lately from a spiritual perspective that's been encouraging you, that maybe would encourage our listeners, those who are in the sports world, who love Christ and who have a relationship with him. Has there been a Bible verse or a scripture or something that's been encouraging you of late that you can share with us?
Romans 12:10, I think, would be one that comes right up to mind. I think, anything that has to do with servant leadership,
Yes.
I just feel like I just think that's what an opportunity for us in football to take one of the main messages in the Bible as I would see it, and the opportunities to expound on that, and to reinforce that, to teach that are all over. And I just think, we talk about talk about caring and the ability to be, to have empathy and to, are you a window guy? Or are you a mirror guy? Are you in a room full of mirrors? All I see is myself everywhere I look. Are you in a room full of windows where you look out and see others and see how to, we talk about like learn your learners, try to ID who it is that you're working with and identify like their talents, their skill. And there's really nothing better than knowing your people and seeing a talent in someone that hasn't recognized it yet.
Yeah.
And then really working with them so that they recognize that talent. And then, man, you've just transformed a life. I mean, there's nothing better than that. You have to, you can't be in a room full of mirrors for that to happen though. And I think sometimes, room full of windows and you're looking out, you get close enough, you'll see something. You'll see a reflection of you. I think God will always take care of you. But I think the ability to look out and see where you can help people. I think when, like for instance, today I got a phone call from an old friend I hadn't talked to in a while, and he called and just checking up on me and saying, "Hey, I watched some of the talks I have, and Dave, you're getting better with it. I'm not very good at those right now." And so you're getting better, and he's giving me encouragement. But man, I'm like bouncing up and down now because of his call, just because he cared. And just, I think that's true wherever you go. And I think you have to look, just to know your people and serve them.
That's really well said. He is Dave Aranda from Baylor, new head football coach at Baylor, and we'll be watching in 2020. Whatever that looks like, we'll be watching for sure, and hopefully we'll get some football going, and we'll have a great season here in Baylor, in Waco, I should say, for Baylor. Dave, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you, appreciate your time, and all the best to you. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
And many thanks to Dave Aranda from Baylor for joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. We certainly wish him and Baylor football nothing but the best for the 2020 season, which we hope takes place. It's kind of a weird situation right now. We think there's going to be college football. We certainly hope there's going to be college football, but we can't predict if there's going to be college football because we can't predict what already has happened in 2020 with this pandemic. But certainly we wish Dave nothing but the best, and we hope that there will be college football to watch and play in the fall of 2020. We thank Dave. We also thank our sponsors, IJM, the International Justice Mission. Check them out at ijm.org/TF and become a freedom partner. Join the fight to end slavery in our lifetime. You can also reach me directly via my email address, jason@sportsspectrum.com. I'd love to hear from you. Any ideas or thoughts on today's show, or even just some guest ideas, some suggestions on who we should be talking to, email me, jason@sportsspectrum.com. And one last thing, would love to have for you to leave a review of this podcast over on the Apple iTunes podcast app page by leaving a review. First of all, subscribing, which would be amazing, and then leave a review. It helps get the word out when these reviews are left on the podcast app, and any sort of opportunity to have this be heard by more people is just another way to glorify God as far as we're concerned. We just want to bring the name of Jesus back into the conversation. So definitely leave a review on Apple iTunes podcast app. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time right here on Sports Spectrum. We love you guys. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and please do stay safe.